Okay, to get you started on this first project, or not our first project, our last project, I wanted to just do this quick rundown tutorial just to refresh your minds. We're gonna go create a new project. Okay, we'll click on Browse, and we're going to select the residential template. We'll hit Open and OK. And then we want to make sure that we adjust our temporary dimensions. We're going to go faces of core, and we're going to select openings. We're going to click on the project units, which is this little icon, or UN. And I'm going to select, so the length is the one we want to play around with. We don't need it to be at a 130 seconds. So 1/8 should be fine. We'll hit OK. The angle, we'll talk about, you know what? Let's leave that. We'll talk about that in a future tutorial. We'll hit OK. We have thin line set, and we want to make sure that well, you're probably used to shaded at this point. Or if you want to get more comfortable with hidden line, which is how it's kind of used within the profession, you can do that as well. But in my tutorials, I'm going to be using shaded and then fine. Okay. All right. So we have, these are the very basic, quick setup to get started. Now, what I really want to cover is how to get started with the project when all you have is an image of a floor plan. So I downloaded an image. I'm going to, now it's very important that the image is a JPEG or a PNG file, okay? Which if you download it from the internet, chances are that's what it is, but I do need to make sure that that's, sometimes there are GIF files and those do not work. So I'm going to click on Insert, and we're going to click on Import Image, and then I'm going to find my file. There we go, example plan, and I'll hit Open. Okay. Now I want to place it in between our elevation markers, right? Because we're going to have to adjust. We want these elevation markers working. So let's click right there. And there's my image. Okay. Now in this image, I do have a scale, but it's metric. Okay. Now you can use metric if you want to make that conversion. That might actually be the best thing to do if you have a scale. And if it's not in metric, if it's in feet and inches, perfect. That's going to make your life a lot easier. If you have a scale and it's in metric, then go onto Google and convert, 2 meters into feet and inches, right? But I'm going to assume that we do not have anything, okay? So if you do not have a scale, then we have to take a look at the floor plan. And what I'm looking for is generic sizes or sizes we know need to be a certain, or objects that we know need to be a certain size. So for example, I can look for the kitchen. That's usually my go-to. It's actually a couple of different places. The kitchen, right, is one place where I go because typically standard depth of a kitchen countertop is 24 inches, 2 feet. Okay. Most cabinets, boxes or most kitchen cabinets are 2 feet deep. Now that's not a code, that's just kind of standard. And this is where it gets tricky because you can customize cabinets. So sometimes they're 27 or sometimes they're to the liking of the client. But if there is nothing else, then you can always just kind of generalize the kitchen counter depth to 24 inches. The other thing that we can generalize is the front door. Typically, your front doors are 3 feet, and that is a building code. So I would come over here and I would say, okay, well, this door is 3 feet. However, 3 feet is a minimum. They can sometimes be wider. okay? And just looking at this floor plan, it looks as though the building is over here, and I'm not quite sure. Maybe this is actually the front door. But even then, that could be a bit confusing. Now, the last thing I would look at is the interior doors. And this is typically where I kind of will go to, because although this model does not have to be exact, and I'm not going to go in and make sure that everything is exact, you still want it to have some sort of reference to kind of a real world setting. And one building code that's very common, that doesn't get changed as much, is the width of your interior doors. Okay, I've talked about this in very early on tutorial, but the width of an interior door needs to be 2 feet 8 inches. Okay, so that's 32 inches wide. They can be wider, but a lot of places, even custom homes, they don't really make the doors wider. They will change the height. So instead of 6'8", they go to 7 or maybe 8-foot doors, but the widths typically always stay the same. Okay. On top of that, there's so many interior doors as opposed to one kitchen depth or one entry door that it's kind of nice to be able to, or it's kind of safe to be able to adjust the size of one interior door, knowing that all of the other ones throughout the house will also be adjusted. Okay, so in this case, what I'm going to do is scale my image, and I'm going to use an interior door to set that scale. So what I'll do is make sure that the image is selected. In the modify raster image, I'm going to click on the scale tab, okay, which is the shortcut is RE. So I'll click there. And now what I want to do is zoom in as far as I can, really, to my door. Now it's 32 inches, 2 feet 8 inches, clear. So that means from the opening. So if I'm looking at this correctly, okay, I'm going to, let's see. We see the pixels, right? I'm going to go and assume that the darker pixel, so from right here, that's the end of the window or end of the wall. And I'm going to say that this darker one is as well. Okay. So I'm going to click, want to get as close as I can to that line. So I'll click there. And now I'm going to go straight down. You have to make sure that we get that blue dash line. That means that it's straight, because you want to make sure that it is actually straight. And we're going to zoom in and click right there. And then I'm not going to touch anything. I'm just going to type in 2 space 8, enter. Okay, 2 space 8, 2 feet 8, enter. And now I'll zoom out. Okay, now it doesn't look like anything has happened, but I'm going to use my measuring tape here. And I'm going to click from there to there. And I'm 2 feet 7. I move this down, there we go. So I'm pretty much at 2 feet 8 inches, right? Now, where you click, that's a judgment call. That's entirely up to you. We're really just looking for a generalization. Scale this image generally to a size that we can use, okay? And that's it. We now have the image set, okay? So I'll go ahead and click. Now, the next thing I want to do is make sure that I lock this image in place, okay? Because we don't want to be able to move it around, especially if we're going to be adding walls and doors and windows. And if we have to click on something, we don't want to accidentally click our base image and then that moves everything. And now our walls are no longer aligned. We don't want to deal with any of that issue. So let's go ahead and pin this. So you type PN, click here, and you'll notice that it now has a little pin. And now I cannot, if I click on it, I cannot select it. Okay. Now the thing though that we've now lost is our elevation markers. So I can do one or two things. I could hide this, so or select it, right click and hide in view, okay, element, or I could kind of go fishing for it, which I kind of like to do. So I'll do a cross window and you'll notice that it popped up right there. So now that I see that, I can go ahead and bring this out of the way. And I just noticed it's over here. So let me go ahead and do another cross window and bring this out. I have no idea where it's at over here. So I'll do a cross window. There it is. And then we'll do the same thing over here. There we go. And bring that out. Okay. So at this point, I now have my image that I can go ahead and trace or work off of. Okay. So now what I could also do is create my own or start building the walls. Okay. I can start building the walls by just tracing over this, right? Setting our location line correctly. And let's go finish face exterior. I'll click there. Okay. And what happens is when I get close, you'll notice that it says 5 feet 2, 5'1". Instead of eyeballing or just kind of clicking there, I'll actually enter the dimension that I see there. So I will type in 5 space 2. Okay. The reason why I do that is because it's so easy to let's see, right, if we go 2, 3, well, it kind of does snap. Sometimes it's not as accurate, so it'll be like 2, 3. Yeah, you see 2, 3 1/4, 2, 3 3/4. And you want to begin to kind of be really consistent. One, you're going to be having to dimension everything. So it's a lot easier to dimension to a whole number than it is to a fraction. And then eventually you're going to want things to align. So that's easier to do when things are at a whole number. Okay. Now what I wanted to cover really quickly here is notice that I just created this wall. Now I'm going to want to create the same wall over here. But if I just start, well, I do have that blue dash line that tells me that I'm aligned to that edge. So if I click there, and I also type in 5, 2, now these two are aligned because we started at the same place. But sometimes that blue line isn't there. So if you want, what we can do is go to the architecture tab and just begin to create a bunch of reference planes. So I'll go ahead and create a plane right there. And so now I know that when I create a wall, I can click right there at that point and bring this out. And now I'll use the 5 feet 2. Okay. But actually paying closer attention to this floor plan, this wall here is not aligned to this wall. So it's okay for this one, for these two to not be aligned, right? That's how you're going to go about creating a drawing off of an existing floor plan. If the lines don't exactly line up, if if you're slightly off, if the thicknesses aren't exactly the same, then that's fine. That should be fine as well. Okay. All right. Hopefully that helps you guys to get started.